in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 35th episode of the Atlas Society Asks. My name is Jennifer Grossman. My friends know me as JAG. I'm CEO of the Atlas Society. We are the leading nonprofit connecting young people to the ideas of Ayn Rand in creative ways. Today, we are joined by Lenore Skenazy. Before I even get into introducing her, I would like to remind all of you this is a wonderful opportunity to ask her your questions live. So if you're on Zoom, just type them into the chat. And if you are joining us live on YouTube, then just type them into the comment section. We will get to as many of them as possible. So back in 2008, Lenore, as a columnist for the New York Sun, wrote a column entitled "Why I Let My 9-Year-Old Ride the subway Alone." Well, that landed her in a worldwide spotlight, interviewed by all of the major media outlets, but also got her tarred as America's worst mom. Fortunately, that led to a book, Free Range Kids, which really turned into an entire movement. Today, Lenore is president and co-founder of Let Grow. It's a nonprofit that promotes childhood independence and resilience, as well as provides resources for parents, teachers, and legislators. Lenore, welcome again. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. I didn't realize I should be calling you Jag. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, Jag. I thought in my mind you were Jennifer. Now you're Jag. Okay. Hi.
You know, the funny thing is that this upcoming interview prompted a lot of reflections about my childhood, and then also talking with my mother. So when I was growing up, 1966, the year I was born, Jennifer was the most popular name. So
and I think for another 20 years thereafter, I mean, that was just the name. Yeah.
So there were so many, I just got tired of being, the tall Jennifer or the whatever Jennifer. So I just started going with my initials. So there you have it. One of the other reasons I was really looking forward to this interview is that we started this webinar series during lockdowns, and we've had a lot of people that have, I think, correctly pointed to some of the trade-offs, some of the negative consequences of the lockdown for kids. But I was inspired that you actually had found some silver linings. So tell us about what you've been seeing, what you've discovered.
Okay, great. And actually, I just have to ask you a question. If I look like this, do I look like I'm looking down and sad? Because this is the way I look at your face. But if I look here, I'm looking into the camera. Should I be looking into the camera?
Look at the blue dot.
Okay. I will do your bidding. So here's the deal. At Let Grow, we really believe that kids flourish when they have some free time. I know that sounds crazy, but some unstructured, even unsupervised time, probably like if you were born in 66, you had at JAG when you were growing up, you probably had a banana bike. You probably went to the Baskin Robbins. You probably were me back then. And you appreciated it. And maybe you got into some scrapes. Maybe you had some adventures. Maybe you just enjoyed doing whatever you were doing without it being for, someone else. It wasn't for a coach. It wasn't for a teacher. It wasn't for a grade. It was just because you loved, playing something or making something or doing something. And at Let Grow, we feel like we've taken that, not Let Grow, but society over the past 2 generations, I hate to say it, she was 2 generations, has been making childhood into sort of a resume building time. And the twin fears that we say are stalking American parents are that their children will be kidnapped, raped, and eaten, or not get into Harvard. And either way, it's such a horrible tragedy that you better be with them all the time, helping them, watching them, goosing them, making sure that they're not hurt in any way, shape, or form. And to us, that's been a mixed bag, let's put it that way, because kids are getting pretty anxious, and without any time to figure out what you really love to do, because you're just doing stuff because you're driven to it and it's good for you and you should be doing it and this will help you in the long run. How do you figure out who you really are, what you really love to do, and even, your trajectory. I did a fun story for Reason recently where I asked a lot of people, could they see the germ of who they were going to become or an interest starting really young? And I'll ask you that in a minute, but I do have to rattle on because there's a point to this, which is that we thought when suddenly COVID hit and kids weren't in soccer and they weren't in school and they weren't going to Kumon and they were sort of thrown for a loop, especially at the very beginning when the remote schooling hadn't really geared up yet. They had what we'd been hoping they had, except it happened to be via a pandemic, which was scads of free time, unstructured time. And so we quickly put together a survey and asked 1,600 kids, ages 8 to 13, across the economic spectrum and across the geographic spectrum, and 1,600 parents, what new things were the kids doing, getting into, learning just for fun? And it was a very cheerful experience to hear, what parents were surprised by, and most of it was so good. I mean, we were sort of eager to ask these questions because we live in a society where everything is, what's the worst thing? Let's focus on all the terrible things that are happening. Like, we know it's terrible. Nobody wants a pandemic, right? So let's see if there's anything positive going on. And there was just a whole lot of growth in kids' sort of wacky, quirky interests and figuring out what they liked. So that has been a silver lining of COVID.
Yeah, I think that definitely sounds like it was a silver lining. Also, parents having a greater window into what their children were being taught. So there was more transparency, and some parents said, you know what, this isn't working for me. I'm going to try some other kind of option because of the content, of what they were being taught.
Yeah, I was going to say what they also had a window into, because we didn't actually ask about the content of school or do you approve or disapprove, but we asked, what are you seeing in your kid that you hadn't seen? And parents were spending way more time at home than they had before, as were the kids. And when we asked parents, we gave them a list, and it, when you do a legitimate survey, it tumbles the words around. So it's not always the same order. So you're not getting the bias of I'll just click off the first 5. And we asked, are you feeling, angry, disappointed, proud, excited, all these different adjectives about your kids. And the top one was proud. I mean, and that wasn't always, the top one in your choices. And the bottom one was disappointed. And I think, when life before COVID was this giant rush, to get ready for school and out the door and off to soccer and come home and reading log and homework. And, you didn't really get to sometimes some parents said that they didn't even have time for their kids to help them out around the house, because to teach them how to do the dishes or the sweeping or the cooking would have taken too much time. And if they spilled, oh my God, you're 15 minutes behind and you'll never make it up. The whole day will be ruined. And so parents were sort of doing a lot of stuff for the kids that when they didn't have to rush that way. I mean, it was literally because they didn't have to rush that the kids started blossoming. And can I tell you one cute story?
Please.
All right. So this was when I was, okay. Well, all right. This is number one then. So one mom who was a mother of one in Virginia, used to be a school counselor. Then she moved to Virginia and she was now a stay-at-home mom, and her daughter was 7 in first grade. And she said that before COVID, every morning when it was time to get up, she'd go and she'd wake up her kid, and then she'd go do something, and then she'd come back and the kid was still asleep. And we're going to call the kid Jennifer. Why not? It's not you anymore, right? Right. And Jennifer, it's time to get up. And like, oh, get up. And then you come back. Jennifer, you're still not up. I can't believe it. Oh my God. All right, here's your clothes. I'll go downstairs. And the mom would run downstairs and get breakfast ready and put out the juice and the cereal. And, Jennifer's dragging her feet. And so she'd put stuff in the backpack, and there goes the books and the homework or whatever. And finally, Jennifer would come and eat what she had to eat. And then it would be like, let's get in the car already, because if you don't get in the car already, you're going to be at the end of the line at the drop off, which means that you're there for the next 36 years, just no fun. And you're late for work and she's late for school. And so you rush out the door and you get her and you drop her off, and then you continue on to whatever you're doing. And that was a normal morning. And then COVID hits, school goes remote, mom's not working. Mom starts sleeping in the morning, right? Because she doesn't have to get her kid anywhere with this split second timing. And her daughter, no longer being rushed and dragged out of bed and treated like, the dog, starts getting out of bed on her own. And she goes downstairs, and what does she do? She makes breakfast. She gets out the cereal somehow and pours her juice and her milk. And then, this is my favorite part, is that then some mornings, not every morning, but some mornings, then she goes, gets out a banana, gets out a yogurt, goes to the toaster, toasts a couple pieces of bread, gets them out, butters them for her mom, and makes breakfast for the mom. So suddenly she's, and the thing that's so interesting to me about that story is not that, oh my God, a 7-year-old can make breakfast, obviously, but she had it, right? The way our world was structured, the way our days were run, with all this split second timing, it never occurred to either of them that there was this alternative child unborn, that hadn't come out yet, hasn't poked its way through. And it wouldn't have come out had there not been this very dramatic and drastic sudden change in our lives. So the way I phrase it, to make sense to me, and I think hopefully it makes sense to you, which is that kids are seeds, right? And there's all this, information, DNA in them, but seeds need water to grow. And for kids, free time is the water. They hadn't had any.
Yeah. So now that you did that study or that survey, I think pretty early on, and
we did it in April and May, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So for a lot of people, the lockdowns were still like really relatively new. Now we've been in them, almost a year. Do you think that those results, have shifted, or are you seeing, some of the negativity of kids feeling? Because certainly we see, and I know from listening to your book on Audible.
Oh, good for you. Yeah, that's not me reading it. It's a funnier person. She's great.
Yeah, that the news feeds fear and serves up the worst headlines. But I have been seeing even the New York Times recently.
Even the New York Times, pretty depressing.
Yes, even the New York Times has really I think shied away from some of the negative consequences and possible trade-offs with lockdowns. And so, but even the New York Times had an article about suicides and
now you'll see what a total wimp I am. I couldn't read the article. I just couldn't read the article. It was just too sad and horrible. But what am I seeing? I cannot specify what I'm seeing, because it does seem like an entire gamut of things that are going on. On the one hand, kids are getting along better with their siblings, I think, because they have no one else to play with. On the other hand, they're depressed and they're lonely. They wish they could see their friends. I wish I could see my friends. I'm a party thrower. Me with no parties is a sad and wilting Lenore. I know that parents have said that kids are helping out more around the house, and I think that just became normal when there was less time for the parents and more time for the kids, and also the kids were bored, so they did start doing some things. Is this a great time to be a kid? No, listen, where do I live? I live in Jackson Heights, Queens. I'm down the street from Elmhurst Hospital. It was the hospital you saw on the news every day. That's like 3 blocks that way, and I'm sorry to hear a siren going by now. Let's hope it's something good. I guess that's not usually a siren. I think
I like that positive thinking.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I trained myself to ignore reality. It's a losing proposition. What I'm hearing is that these are hard times for everybody. We all wish that we were, that people weren't losing their jobs, that people weren't losing their lives, that we could go about our normal life. And we all certainly appreciate our old lives a lot more. Just, I used to I travel a lot, I give speeches a lot. And, LaGuardia is not the happiest place on earth. That's also like a couple blocks that way. And now I'm like, oh, to have an Aunt Annie's pretzel and be sitting in a hard chair and accidentally forgetting my suitcase at the, which is what I've done, from time to time. For all these, for being wanded. Nobody's wanding me anymore. So it's not the best of times, but I do believe that when kids go back to school, they're going to be okay. I mean, one of the things that we do in our culture is we underestimate the resilience of the species, and particularly of kids. I was thinking, like, what is similar to this? And I started reading, it's 800 pages. I gave up, this big biography of the Beatles. Did you know that, like, Ringo spent about a year or two in a hospital with I don't remember if he had polio or what, but he was stuck in a hospital, and he started playing the drums on like a bedpan or something. And he did okay afterwards, which is not to say that you want your kid to be stuck, in the polio ward of a hospital for 2 years, because that's the only way you'll ever get an international drumming sensation. But kids bounce back from things. And I think my hope is that when they come back to school, there won't be such a frantic effort to cram the academics into them that we're probably faltering a little this year, that that we don't give them a lot of time to play and to goof around and to sort of make up for that kind of lost time, not just the academic lost time. So that's my hope. I think they'll spring back. Well, we're an amazing species.
Definitely, yes, encouraging, and I hope all of us spring back, and that and that we not only spring back, but that we spring forward. That we spring ahead, because I do think that the world has been getting better in so many ways, and it's so tempting to focus on the negative. And for those of you who are joining us on Zoom and on YouTube, please tee up your questions and share also your experience, folks, in terms of what you've seen with your children, with your grandchildren, and what your childhood was like as opposed to what we see today. And I'm going to get to as many of them as possible. Please make them short, because I just can't read, paragraphs on Zoom. So, Lenore, you wrote an article that I thought was particularly interesting, titled "Smothered by Safety."
Oh, yeah.
And you said that parents have been convinced to fear, quote, everything: creeps, kidnappers, germs, grades, flashers. I actually did see a few of those when I was a kid. Frustration.
Maybe we're going to talk about that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So what is driving this fear factor?
Oh, that's my whole book. But let's talk about the strange topic you just brought up of flashers that you saw as a kid. And nobody wants their kid to see a flasher. It's gross. Yeah. But I was talking to my friend, there's a but, there is a but, that's the whole idea of a flasher. I was talking to my friend's mom, who's 80, and she mentioned that she used to go to the park. She lived here in New York City with her sister. And one day some guy, motioned them over to the car and, said to look in, and they looked in and he pointed down, ha, 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 and they're like, ah. And she said, and to this day, we giggle about it.
Yeah.
And I don't recommend, hire a flasher so your children will be resilient and be able to giggle about this, when it's 75 years later. But I do think that the insouciance of her response was sort of normal, before we started seeing all untoward, unpleasant, uncomfortable experiences as automatically traumatic. And I'm not talking about real trauma, because real trauma is traumatic, but we've sort of dumbed trauma down. And in the process, we think like, well, we can't let our kids, climb a tree because they could get hurt, and we can't let them ride their bikes without. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal just a couple months ago about a mom who wanted to give her child the same experience she used to have, which was to go down to the creek and play by herself. And it was a very wonderful memory of hers, the feeling of, being one with nature and curious and alone. And so the way that she realized, or that she felt that she could give to her daughter the same experience, was to give her a phone. Okay.
Mhm.
And then the mom was really exulting because this whole thing had worked out so well, because her daughter was riding her bike someplace and fell off her bike and could call her dad, the husband, and dad could rush over and pick the girl up off her bike and maybe fix the bike for her. And what was interesting to me is that that's not the same experience at all that the mom had. The mom had the experience of being on her own. And if she tripped or scraped herself or got a little lost or confused,
Mhm.
or, there was a snapping turtle, you know, she had to deal with it, and she couldn't call a parent, an adult, over to deal with it instead, to be an intermediary. And the fact that the mom thought that these were like, it's so great because now I can give her the exact same experience, when to me it was the exact opposite experience.
Mhm.
That interests me, because the assumption that you need to have the phone so that you can always contact an adult is back to this sort of underestimating kids and
Mhm.
overestimating the danger. So I think something is lost when kids don't encounter some friction that isn't horrible, but isn't perfect, right?
Mhm.
And isn't immediately fixed by an adult. And that's what I'm trying to bring back. Even as I say, like, if you want to give your kid a phone, that's fine. My kids have phones. There's no one right way to do it. It's just something to be thinking about. What does it mean when we assume that our kids always need an adult to intervene lest something happen to them?
Interesting. So we got a question here from Bill McLaughlin, who says he first became aware of your work, Lenore, when he read The Coddling of the American Mind.
Usually I have it right here next to me. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So
Great
we got to
book.
get those two on our show
Yeah.
next. And Bill has not yet read your book, but he's going to, right, Bill? So he's
New edition
taking a
coming
little
out this summer.
shortcut. Yes.
Actually,
Really?
John is the John wrote the foreword. John Haidt.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
spectacular.
Yeah.
So Bill wanted to know, because he hasn't read your book yet,
Okay.
that the research on the extremely low probability of serious negative consequences with free range kids, like the kidnappings and et cetera. Did you do that as part of your research for the book, or was it also sort of in defense to the backlash or the controversy that you inspired with that Sun column?
Oh, I think I had done the research before the column. I'm a newspaper columnist by trade. And so I do my research all the time. And when I looked back on old columns that I'd written before Why I Let My 9-Year-Old Ride the Subway Alone, I realized I'd written one about, yes, I let my 6-year-old go to the bathroom and, at the mall.
Oh.
Actually, not even a mall, because we're in New York. I guess it's like the children's theater or something. And yes, I let my children go play in the courtyard without me. And as a newspaper reporter, which I was at the New York Daily News for 14 years, I knew that crime was going down in my city. I know that crime is at I think a 50-year low at this point, although with COVID, it's been going up a little bit again.
Mhm.
And so, but what I didn't do until I wrote my book was have somebody crunch the numbers for me. And I had this guy named Warwick Cairns, who wrote a book called How to Live Dangerously. He's a British author. And I had him look at the numbers of, what are the number, how many American kids are there and how many American kidnappings are there. And he crunched the numbers and he came up with this statistic that I quote a lot, which is that if for some reason you wanted your child to be kidnapped by a stranger off the street in what the crime researchers call a stereotypical kidnapping, which I would call a Law and Order SVU kidnapping, how long would you have to keep them outside for this to be statistically likely to happen? And that's it. It's a weird way of framing it, but it's sort of like how many Powerball, whatever you ever call them, tickets would you have to buy before you could be likely to win Powerball? So how long, Jag, do you think you would have to keep a kid outside? And maybe you got to that point in my book already, for it to be statistically likely that they would be kidnapped by a stranger.
I think it was several hundred years. Is that right?
It was several 100,000 years. Yes.
Several 100,000 years.
It was 750,000 years.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
and as I like to point out, after the first 100,000, it's really not a kid anymore. So it's just what I also discovered in doing all my research is that I have amazing numbers. I have, your child is way more likely to die in a car ride to the store than walking to the store. Your child is more likely to be hit by lightning than this or that, statistics that I could juggle like flaming hoops, but it doesn't matter. Because the only thing that changes parents, it's not the numbers, it's not Lenore, it's not my book, it's not this fabulous podcast. It is seeing their kid do something independently and come home triumphant and come home, which they will. And that it's like the Grinch. It's like your heart grows 3 sizes larger that day. You're so proud of your kid that you can't remember, why did I think he couldn't walk to the bus stop? Why did I think she had to, have me watch the entire soccer game? It just changes you, and it changes the kid, because the kid sees that you believe in them finally, you don't just love them, you believe in them, and you do believe in them. And then you get this surge of joy at looking at this blossoming young man or woman, like in the end of the Music Man, that's my Henry. And that's the joy that we've taken out of parents' lives by saying, no, you must be with them every second and making sure they're okay and holding their hand and cutting their meat. It's a drag for both generations. It's a wrong turn that we took.
Yeah, it's interesting. What you're saying reminds me of that old Yiddish joke about 2 Jewish mothers watching as one of the mother's son is being carried by.
I know this joke.
And the other mother says,
Auntie, what?
Yeah, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. This is terrible. Your son, he can't walk. And just as a tragedy. And the mother of the son says, he can walk. Thank God he doesn't have to. So,
Right. Right.
But,
Old joke. I love it.
But what you're saying is that when we let our kids walk alone, run, do these different things, that we're actually building more resilient kids. And I think that this is not the first of the pandemics or emergencies or crises that we're going to go through. And
Right. I
think,
wish.
yeah, kids are going to grow up in many ways in a better world. But I definitely, I've been through enough crises, house burning down.
You had a house burn down?
Yeah, I live in Malibu. It's in Malibu. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So hopefully this one, but
Wow,
what
that's
helped
horrible.
me
I'm so sorry.
thank you. What helped me, I think, get through it is I had been through some other, bad things in my life. So I do kind of see
That's the insurance company is calling. We're not going to pay.
Yeah, no,
Right.
no, believe me, no, they didn't. So yeah, no, that is now I'm living with this past few months. You were asking me about books on the shelves, and it's my dad's his textbooks. So I've been taking care of my parents, and they've been taking care of me, and it speaks to what you were talking about, is having this. We didn't, volunteer for this. We haven't asked for this, but we have these opportunities, and life can be what we make of it. And so all of you guys watching, life is what you make of it. So ask your question. Just type them on in there to the chat, and we will get to as many of them as possible. Make them short if you would, just because it's to read them as we are.
I'm reading this one now, the one about Minnesota and growing up and going to the park at 5 or 6 and the mom rang a dinner bell. I have to say that was common, and people like those stories, but then they say, I ask people like, what was your favorite thing you did as a kid? And generally it was, whatever. I said, just put in your mind. And then I say, okay, was your mother with you? And, the hands come down because the great joy, I was just interviewing a woman yesterday from Nevada, where there's 2 people sponsoring a, you can call it a free range kids bill, you can call it a reasonable childhood independence bill. And both the women, one is a gay African-American Democrat, co-sponsoring the bill with a white Republican grandmother of 20. And what they both remember is the same thing: getting on their bikes, going outside, making forts, playing with their friends. The Republican lady was at age 6. She was living in a trailer, and her mom worked during the day, and so she was free during the summer to go around and play. And the lady across the street befriended her and taught her how to cook and to iron. And a man befriended her, and instead of this being a horrible story, because most of them aren't, he showed her rocks, and she became a sort of a fan of rocks for a while, which I am too. So you know, we want to give kids the best of everything, and yet the best of what we remember often, and I'll ask you too, Jag, was becoming part of the world and figuring out what you liked to do. And people say, well, we can't do that now because times have changed. But quixotic though it may be, I am trying to make people realize that the thing that has changed is us, our fear level, our confidence level, our trust level, our catastrophizing level, but not the crime level. The crime level, as we've discussed, is back to what it was in the 60s. So it really is just, I would love to infuse us all with giving everybody the benefit of the doubt. Strangers on the street, your own kids, parents who are raising their kids differently from the way you would. That doesn't mean it's horrible. That doesn't mean you should call the cops. Just like assume that, I think you'll live in a better world if you assume that most things are okay, and that by dealing with some things that aren't okay, your kids rise to the occasion.
So Lenore, tell us, you mentioned the legislation. Tell us a little bit more about Let Grow, and about, because I actually hadn't been aware. I knew that you had the book. I wasn't aware of the broad range of your activities, and also what you are actually doing to try to work with different people and stakeholders across the political spectrum.
Completely across the spectrum.
Yeah, to get some actual legislative reform.
Right. So legislation is just a small part of what we're doing because we're a 501c3 and also because we do so many other things. But right now we do have laws being proposed in Nevada, South Carolina, Texas, Oklahoma, and Idaho that were inspired by the 2018 law that passed in Utah that was called the Free Range Parenting Law. And it said that it's not neglect to take your eyes off your kids. If you think your kids are ready to walk to school, play outside, and that's either because you want them to be free range or by necessity, you're working 2 jobs. So your 7-year-old or your 8-year-old comes home, makes a snack and does her homework because you can't be there. That's poverty or that's necessity, but it's not neglect. So we want parents to be able to make choices based on them knowing their kids, as opposed to somebody saying, well, I wouldn't let my child play in the park until they're 12 or whatever, and calling 911. And even if they do call 911, then we would like, the authorities to say, well, is the child okay? Yes, she's laughing. Is she, does she look, homeless or, I don't even want to get to the question of homeless because once again, you can look disheveled because you come from a family without a lot of money. That doesn't mean that you're not cared for and that you should be turned in to the authorities. And frankly, having the authorities come to your home and say, you need to take parenting lessons or you need to do this or that, or we're going to take your kids away, when really, what I need is a break. I trust my kid. She comes home. You can see she just did her homework. Let's assume that unless the child is actually neglected by somebody who is blatantly disregarding danger, that it's up to the parent, because we're always going to have different levels of what we think is the exact level of, supervision that we think is correct.
So here's an interesting question from Lawrence. Lawrence, welcome back. And he asks, is the quote unquote fear something happening to your child and the protective response? He was asking if it has any, if you see any patterns or correlations in terms of political ideology. I had the same question also in terms
really interesting.
Regions. My mother was talking to me this morning about growing up in Louisiana and just taking a horse and swimming, just going off like for
Mhm,
until
mhm.
so I don't know if you're seeing if there are different places where it's, just have a less, is it income levels or?
Yeah, I've been, talking about this same topic now for the 9-year-old on the subway is 22. So I've been across the country and I've heard from people in cities and rural people. I haven't seen a particular thing that always indicates, oh, that's going to be a helicopter neighborhood. Helicopter meaning that parents are expected to hover or not. What was I going to think? I mean, here's an example. I got a call from a guy named Stu Moore, who is a superintendent of schools in Moscow, Kansas, which is population 299. You think they could just have one, bring in a kid for the day, for God's sake, get it up to 300, but it's 299 according to Wikipedia. And he called because of something I'm going to describe in a little bit, which is the projects that we have that are free that we suggest that schools do to build more independence in the kids. And I said, why are you calling me from, I'm looking at Moscow, Kansas's Wikipedia thing. You have 299 people there. And he said, yes, but here's what's changed. He's been I guess, working at the school for 20 years. And unlike 20 years ago, he can look out his window to houses that he can see from the school, and the parents are driving, backing out of the garage and driving the kids over to the school. And that just didn't used to happen. So it's not like the school is further from the kids or the weather patterns have changed. It's just the norms that have changed. I went back and looked, and I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, Wilmette, Illinois. And where a mom was investigated for letting her 8-year-old walk the dog. I couldn't believe it. It became a national story. It's like, wow, that's my town. And I went to look in front of my school where I had walked starting at age 5, and the crossing guard was a 10-year-old. And the strangest thing about this story is that I married him, but that's another story. He's over there. We can call him in. You could see him. Didn't know that years later we would meet up again and marry. But now there's signs in front of the school, one-way traffic only during pickup and drop-off hours. And that's new. I mean, it's the same catchment, it's the same school, it's the same suburb, and yet somehow kids aren't expected to walk themselves there anymore. So that's just a sea change. And you actually hear it in the words that we use, because I'll bet when you were going to school in the morning, it was arrival, right? And in the afternoon, it was what?
Oh, just departure.
Departure, dismissal. And now it's drop off and pick up.
Wow.
Isn't that cool? I mean, written into the words that we use is an adult who's going to drop them off like a FedEx package and then pick them up and take them where they have to be next. And thus, culture changes. And so what can change parents? Because you're asking about, the fear level and who is it affecting? I'd say it's affecting the entire culture. I've seen it on The Simpsons. I've seen it on, there's a new show called Duncanville where they talk. I mean, it's just part of the culture now, is to assume that kids are under the watchful gaze of the parents, or the parents are negligent and the child is in danger. So what changes this? If it's not me, and it's not the statistics, and it's not my book, and it's maybe not even the blessed coddling of the American Mind book, what can change parents? And the answer is a push. And so what Let Grow does is we have a project. It's called the Let Grow Project. And it is simply this. We suggest that teachers give their kids the Let Grow project as a homework assignment. And the assignment is this: Mom, it says I have to come home and do something new on my own without you or Dad or my guardian. And look, here's a page of ideas. I can climb a tree. I can run an errand. I can make a muffin. I can walk to my friend's house, whatever it is. We have 100 ideas. I cannot remember them all. But and it doesn't mean that you can only do one of those. You can do whatever it is. If you live near you're in Louisiana, you can go shrimping. I have no idea what people do in Louisiana. You can make a beignet. What is that? Beignet, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yum. The point is that the parents get this little push, and because all the parents in that class, or even that school, or even that district are letting go to let grow, they do. And also the school said it was good for them. We send home a little letter that explains that independence is really a very good anti-anxiety thing. And so their kid says, okay, well, what I'd really like to do is climb the tree or I'd want to go to the park with my friends. And the parents say, okay, it's for school. It's you got to do it. And so they do it. And then that's the reward. The kid comes home and they're happy and they're sweaty and they're hungry and they had the greatest time and they met a squirrel. And pretty soon it's normalized. And we've heard from, like, my favorite quote was from a principal in one district on Long Island that had done the project just once with the whole school, an elementary school. And the week after the project, she was driving home, same route, 17 years principal, and she saw 4 kids outside. 4 is not a ton, but she saw 2 were on bikes, 1 was on a scooter, and 1 was on roller skates. And she actually stopped, she's the principal, she can talk to them without them freaking out, and said, what are you doing now? And they said, oh, well, we just decided it was fun. And so we're trying to re-normalize kids outside again and parents letting go. And then of course the kids start talking to each other. What did you do? Oh, I want to try that. Oh, you made one of those. Let me do that. And the parents talk, and we're like Lady Bird Johnson, her big thing as first lady was to bring back wildflowers. How do you bring back wildflowers? Wildflowers are supposed to be wild. What do you do? And she sent out seeds, and so you're growing something that's supposed to grow wild, but you have to goose it at some point. You have to make it, you have to at some point use an unnatural means to getting a natural end. And that's what we're doing with kids. And we're doing it with parents. Parents have had the fear sucked out of them. I don't blame any parents for being afraid in a culture that you can read the worst case scenarios all the time. Really, if you watch Law and Order, there's always some kid being kidnapped and raped. It's just horrible. Why is it on every single second of every single day? And then you watch a Liam Neeson movie and you think that trafficking is going on right and left. And then you get a note home from the school, parents, we saw a van near the bus stop yesterday. And so Parents Magazine is telling you they have one thing where it says, bring shoelaces whenever you go to another kid's house whenever you bring your kid over there for a play date. Why?
A shoelace might break.
That's almost sane. No, it's to tie shut the other family's cabinets. So your child, yeah. So we've been brainwashed as parents to see everything through the lens of what could possibly go wrong. I mean, you were referring to that article that I had in Cato Unbound about smothered by safety. Well, you're told that everything is not safe enough, and products are recalled because a button fell off of the bunny's eye, and now you're recalling 1 million bunnies because somebody might eat the button and might be a choking hazard. So in this culture that is shoving fear down our throats because it sells and it's exciting and we're in a litigious society and we need eyeballs to get people to watch our site so that we get more ad revenue, fear is out there to this degree. And what you need is a reality check, and you need to be pushed. So the Let Grow Project gently pushes you into letting your kid do something that you would have done without a second thought, a generation ago. And when it happens and the world doesn't collapse and your kid is happy and you're proud, that's what changes parents. So Let Grow is desperate to get the Let Grow Project and the Let Grow Play Club into more schools. The Play Club is just saying, keep the school open before or after school for mixed age, device-free, organize it themselves, free play, and put some junk out there, put some suitcases and basketballs and jump ropes and cardboard boxes. And that's as close as they're going to come to you going into a vacant lot with your friend and building a fort, or into the woods and climbing a tree, as you're going to get today. There's an adult there just in case of emergencies, but they don't organize it. They don't solve the arguments. They don't say, why don't we make the teams this way? So you're doing all the interacting that is really good for kids and really good for democracy, because you learn how to get along and how to deal with frustration and how to change the rules if the rules aren't working. And all that doesn't happen if you're in an organized activity. So between the Let Grow Project and the Let Grow Play Club, we really think that we can renormalize, I'd say 100,000 years of human history of kids doing things on their own and coming up with solutions.
Spectacular. All right, folks, we have about 15 more minutes, so we can
Wow.
still get to, yeah, I know.
Read what's over here. Yeah.
It flies when you're having fun, and I'm having a lot of fun with you, Lenore. I know both
Oh,
of
I'm
you and I have
glad.
technically challenged days. So
Yeah, can't think
speaking
about
of
that.
moms, we actually have a mom here in the audience, new mom, Erin Redding,
Oh,
wants to know, how do you best balance giving your child experiences and enough time, enough free time to be, bored and creative?
okay, wait, I'm actually answering this question myself. It's the Let Grow project because the organization is Let Grow, which is sort of a pun on let go. So how much free time? How much free time you got? I mean, I think that there's time for so much in a week. If a kid has a Saturday free, how amazing. Actually, one of John Haidt's ideas was, why don't we encourage people to have free play Fridays? Like, keep
Nice.
Friday after school free,
Mhm.
no lessons, no nothing. And so kids can just play. There's a school in San Francisco, the Hamlin School, where I spoke actually a couple of times. Private school, very lovely, and they keep the school open after school every day for free play, and they encourage the parents to, like, don't schedule every afternoon. On the other hand, some scheduled stuff is great. Art lessons, piano lessons. I'm not saying have them live like a caveman, but I'd say just balance it, and your kid will help you. I mean, my kids, they were terrible at their music lessons. And they hated them, and we couldn't stand listening to them. And at some point, we all just said enough and gave them back some free time, and they found other things to do.
And I know the Erin in particular who asked the question, I have seen a picture of her baby. Her
Oh,
baby
a baby. Yeah,
looks,
your baby,
he
you got to
looks,
kind
he
of
look,
look after.
he is a tough looking baby. I call him the bruiser. So, hopefully she'll let him go and get bruised while learning about consequences and taking risks and surviving things.
So
So
can I,
Laura,
can I, wait, can we
yeah,
just
go
talk
ahead.
about babies for 1 second?
Sure,
I
yeah.
mean, I do feel, new parents are just bombarded with all the horrible stuff that could, very slight chance of happening, or all the normal stuff that has a big chance of happening, but isn't so terrible. So now, did you realize they sell baby knee pads? Did you know that?
Yeah, in your
Oh, you
book,
read about it in my book? Yeah. So while I was
you
writing,
said they're called kneecaps.
right, they're just
Kids are
crazy.
born with them. Yeah.
Yeah, their babies are born with baby knee pads that are, called, I guess, fat, or dimples, flesh. So while I was writing the second edition of this book, which is sitting here, like, you can actually, here's a lot of it right now.
Wow. All right.
What should I get? But in my emails, because I'm on the list of, like, mommy bloggers, somebody wrote and said, guess what? We have these wonderful new neoprene silicone baby knee pads. And, these are great because they were developed by
By babies.
you'd
By
think
babies, just like
I would
you.
sort of trust one that was developed by a
Right.
baby, because it'd be cute. Actually, there are the funny ones that are little mops that you put on them. And so then when they crawl
that's
around,
fun.
they're actually mopping your floor, which I could get behind. No, this one said the knee pads were developed by a child physical therapist. And I thought, this is back to what I'm trying to explain, which is that why is something being pitched to us parents as if our children need physical therapy when they are not disabled? A disabled kid, early intervention is great. And I have friends who actually do that for a living. They're early intervention occupational therapists. But the idea that all children are in need of something developed by a therapist to get them through a normal stage of development, which is crawling, because if they are bruised or chafed or hurt or fall, that's something that they can't handle. That's the society that I'm talking about, that drains all the belief out of parents. The idea that your kid is going to be okay, the idea that your kid can roll with some punches. And that's the society I'm trying to change. I mean, it's a big remit. It is saying that a society that has decided to sort of brainwash us into believing that all children are in danger, either physically or emotionally or socially or psychologically from everything. And so you have to be there buying something or doing something or watching them all the time. That's new. It feels normal to the new parents because that's what the Parents Magazine said, and they're getting, things in the mail. You better buy these knee pads. But in fact, it's completely strange and undermining of our confidence and of our kids' confidence.
Terrific. We have 10 more minutes. I see Alan Dlugash.
I should I say that?
You know
I know
Alan?
him. I love
Yeah.
him. Yes.
So Alan, I returned your call, so check your voice messages. But and thank you for supporting, encouraging others, you know who, to do so as well. So
Wait a minute, Alan, Alan, you and I should talk after this too. I wonder who you know who is. It's very intriguing.
He is he's a proselytizer for the Atlas Society, and we're very grateful for him. So Alan asks, and this is great, this is kind of a step back, how is the country doing overall in restraining over reporting and policing of kid freedom activities? Is the trend going in a good way or in a bad way? So yeah, I mean, are you seeing clearly you guys are in the forefront of some legislative reform, the success of your book. So which which wasn't necessarily a good thing, but I think that show that you were talking about got canceled. So but the negativity in the news continues. So
yeah. I feel like there has been a shift. And I work with a fantastic person named Diane Redleaf, who has been fighting the unwarranted intervention in family life by the authorities for nigh on 40 years. She's sort of a civil rights activist, I'd say. And in particular, she's been upset by how often poverty is mistaken for neglect. But she and I came on each other's radar maybe 6 years ago, because here she was fighting that. And here I was really publicizing cases that I found egregious. I'll give you there were two really famous examples, I would have to say. One was the Métis family, upper middle class, Maryland, Silver Spring. They let their children age 10 and 6 walk home from the park one Saturday afternoon, got the cops called on them. The cops came. After that, Child Protective Services came, and they were threatened with having their kids taken away from them if they didn't sign a form that said, I will never let my kids out of my sight again until this case is resolved. And then weirdly enough, it happened a second time. And this became a cause célèbre because, the parents trusted their kids, knew the neighborhood. The 10-year-old was with the 6-year-old. And why weren't parents allowed to make that decision when obviously they love and know their children best? And in the end, all charges were dropped, but it took it was literally an international outcry. Then there was a case in South Carolina where a single mom, Deborah Harrell, has a 9-year-old kid. And in the summer, when the mom worked her shift at McDonald's, the daughter would always come with her and, sit at a booth, and not even a booth, just table, and play on the laptop while mom worked. Then the laptop was stolen. They had a burglary at the house, no more laptop. So the daughter said, could I go to the park instead? There's a park right near, where the mom worked, where the kid lived. Splash Pad, very popular, tons of kids there. And actually they served breakfast and lunch there. So there were adults there too. And the daughter goes there for day 1. It's great. Day 2, it's great. Day 3, a lady says, where is your mother, little girl? And she says, oh, she's working. I actually have a phone. Do you want to call her? You'll see. And it's like, no, I don't want to call her. And she called 911. And the cops came. They arrested the mom, Deborah. They threw her in jail. And they took away her daughter for 17 days. So this too became a cause célèbre, as it should. And it had a yin-yang effect. It had, everybody was on the same side as me. How dare the authorities arrest a mother who trusts her kid and whose kid is doing something that, once again, was not literally dangerous. Maybe the The disapproving lady who called thought it was dangerous, but literally 750,000 years, you're probably not going to have your kid taken, especially from a popular place with tons of kids around on a summer's day playing in the water, which to me sounds great. Not sad, not bad, great. And the mom knew her daughter. And so that was that. With the sort of publicity of those cases and other cases that I have to say, I keep, when I hear people write to me and I write about them, people are on our side. People are upset at the idea that parents would be second guessed or have to start second guessing themselves. Gee, I want my kid to walk to school. Am I going to be arrested? I want my kid. So on the one hand, I am grateful because why are 5 states considering laws that narrow the definition of neglect to not include trusting your kid to do some things unless you're putting them in literal bad danger? So that's good. But I don't want parents to feel so worried that they're going to be arrested that they don't send their kids outside, because once again, I'm trying to renormalizing it. And that's why, in a sense, the Let Grow Project and the legislation and the Play Club are all working in tandem to renormalize the idea that kids can play, kids can fall off their bikes, it's going to be okay, kids can wander, kids can get lost, kids can find their way back again, kids can meet a dog in the neighborhood, kids can play outside, they can play manhunt, they can play tag, they can play soccer in a field without it being organized and overseen all the time by an adult. So if kids are doing this and it starts looking more normal, like on Long Island, where the principal saw the kids outside again, and especially if we pass some laws that say it sure is normal, it sure is up to the parents unless they're putting them in absolute danger, I think, I've been thinking about it for 13 years. These are the elements that come together that do make it so that we can give the kids the independence they need. And, it's great for them and it's great for us. And we get the independence too, to not always be Velcroed to our kids. When we trust them, we can show them that we trust them, and they can have, a free range, a let grow, an uncoddled childhood.
Wonderful. Well, with that, you are amazing. We just about hit the nail on the head with the time there. So tell us, where do we find you? How do we support you? What
Great.
can we do? You've told us a lot of wonderful resources, parents.
What a lovely pitch. So Let Grow, we're a 501c3. We love donations. With any donations, we are spreading the word further to more schools, to more parents. We have a website. We have these programs. We're getting the word out. And so your help is very much needed and appreciated. If you're a parent or a teacher and you just want to see what we're up to, the website, it's kind of hard to remember because people think it's Let's Grow or Let's Go. And in fact, it is L-E-T Grow, GROW.org. Although if you press .com, we got that too. And that's where you'll find, we have, that's where you can find the Let Grow Project. It's where you can find our advocacy page with, descriptions of how you can get involved in changing the laws or even, creating a proclamation in your town that this is we had, what is it? Ithaca, New York declared itself a free range town, that they want kids to be out and about. So you can get involved that way. There's downloadable posters. There's the Let Grow Independence Kit, which just gives you a bunch of ideas for things that can do on their own. And, and write to me, if you write to info@Let Grow, I guarantee you that at some point I will see it. And I'm Lenore, so you can find me. I'm so easy to find. And I would love to hear from you, and I would love to talk to you some more. And, I've laid my cards on the table. I think kids are smarter and safer and stronger than this crazy, terrified culture gives them credit for. I think it's an insult to the species. It's an insult to the moms. It's an insult to the kids. And we want kids growing up resilient and ready to get back on that bike. And we want them to be problem solvers, and they can't be problem solvers if we're always there solving their problems.
That is so true. As you have said before, all of that fear is not preventing death. It is preventing life. And we are the living, and we want to live. So Thank you, Lenore. Thanks to all of you who joined us.
Yeah.
Great questions, great engagement this week. Please check out more of Lenore's work. Thank you for also your support of the Atlas Society, those who have been enjoying these webinars. Next week, please join us. Check out the time because we have modified the time for our interview with Nadine Strawson because she actually has to teach a class. And then also all of you coming up, you know what Tuesday is. It is Ayn Rand's birthday and we're having a birthday party. So register, and I and David Kelly and Stephen Hicks will see you there. So thanks everybody. Bye.